Welcome back to another episode of Keep It Fictional with the Port Moody Public Library. I almost forgot what our book podcast is called, as you can tell. Yeah, it's the new year. Welcome, welcome. And not only am I very excited about the topic today, I am also very excited because it's been a very long time since all four of us are here together. So great to see all my book friends. Corinne, Emma, and Sadie. And I am Virginia. And welcome, listeners. And thank you for joining us. So, of course, beginning of the year, this is actually the very first episode that we're recording in 2025. And so we thought, we're going to start the year off, of course, with looking forward to see what kind of books are coming out in the next few months that we are excited to read about. So we're going to tell you about them today. And so, it took a while for us to start the podcast because we were all trying to figure out like which 5 books out of all the books that are coming out, which 5. And so it's hard. It's hard to do, but we did it. So, we have lots of books to recommend to everybody to start go through the catalog, put them on hold. And I know that one of the reading kind of goals that we mentioned in our first episode was that we would like to read more books in the genres, in the subjects, in the themes that are in our wheelhouse. So I hope that all of you have managed to find a whole bunch of those. And I hope that, like for Sadie, the publishers have actually answered your challenge and has, got some stuff that you are truly excited to read about. So why don't we start with you, Sadie? What is one of the books that you're excited to read this coming season?
All right. So I am going to start with one that is very much in my wheelhouse. This book comes out March 25th. And in the little short blurb at the top of the Goodreads entry, this is what it says. In this high stakes heist novel, an alchemologist and a con man team up to steal a rare necklace. But complicated feelings of attraction and deception threaten to destroy everything and everyone they love. So yes, this is a very, very Sadie book. It's an extremely Sadie book. This one is called To Steal From Thieves, and it is by M.K. Lobb. And it follows, as it kind of says in that blurb, a con man, Kane Durante, and Zaria Mendoza, who is the daughter of one of London's greatest alchemologists. I'm not sure if that's the same as an alchemist or if it's some fun made up profession. We will see. So this takes place in the dazzling halls of London's Crystal Palace. The event of the season has arrived, the Great Exhibition, an opportunity for the greatest minds of the century to come together under one roof in an unprecedented display of art and invention. And for two unlikely partners in crime, it is about to become the score of a lifetime. We have charming conman, Kane Durante. He works alone, or on occasion with his best friend Fletcher. But when his boss, the infamous kingpin of London's magical dark market, gives him the impossible task of stealing a priceless artifact from the Great Exhibition, he knows it's a job he can't pull off alone. Enter Zaria Mendoza, daughter of one of London's greatest alchemologists. Ever since her father's death, Zaria has been struggling to keep her underground business afloat, and impatient clients are becoming violent. When the infuriatingly handsome, don't know how somebody can be like angrily handsome. Corinne does. Okay, Corinne
disagree.
does.
Absolutely disagree. There have been people who I've just been like, oh!
Like, you are so angry they are handsome, or
They are so hot that it makes me angry. Like, it's like when you see, it's kind of like that frustration thing of like when you see a really cute kitten and you really want to pet and like cuddle that kitten and you can't cuddle that kitten. It's the same thing. It's like that little, how are you so good? Okay.
Okay, all right. I'll give that to you. All right. So when the infuriatingly handsome Kane offers her the promise of enough money to get out of debt and leave London, she knows she can't walk away from this dangerous partnership. But robbing one of the most public, heavily guarded buildings in London isn't going to be easy, especially when love and betrayal threaten to ruin everything they've worked so hard for. Oh, so this is a young adult historical fiction, romance, fantasy, all of the fun things that I enjoy. It's strangely not exactly what it's about, but it's oddly reminiscent of, I think, one of my other most anticipated from a couple years ago, which was called Among Thieves, which was by an M.J. Kuhn, and this is by an M.K. Lobb. It's very similar. So we'll see. I ended up loving that book, so I'm hoping that I will also really love this one as well. All right, this is it right here, To Steal From Thieves. Very dramatic cover, lots of flowing hair and sultry, intense looks. I am here for it, and I am very, very excited. So yeah, that is my not in any order. I'm not going to say that's like my number 5 pick at all, but that is one of the books that I'm looking forward to. As I said, it comes out March 25th, so I do have to wait a few months, but maybe I will see if I can get an arc for that one and start reading it sooner to experience all of that high stakes alchemologist fiction. I'm excited. All right, there's my first pick. Let's see what Emma has for their first pick today.
Alrighty. So my first pick isn't in a genre that I have read for a very long time. It's not like Sadie and her stealing, heist, young adult romantasy stuff. But it is a genre that I've been getting more into the past few months. So this first book is a queer Indigenous horror. And it's by an author named Dennis E. Staples, who is an Ojibwe author from Bemidji, Minnesota. And for those of you that don't know, I used to live in Minnesota. I love any sort of Minnesotan farm country Midwest fiction. So I'm very excited to check this one out. And yeah, I'll pretty much read anything that takes place in Minnesota or the Midwest. So this one should be fun. So I'll just read a little bit from the Goodreads blurb, some of the info that's available about this book. And this one is called Passing Through a Prairie Country. And I do have the cover right here. So the blurb says, for decades, a dark force has terrorized the Languille Lake Reservation. Spoken of only in whispers as the Sandman, he lurks in the hidden Atlantis Lake Resort and Casino, the reservation's main attraction and source of revenue, leeching its patrons' dreams and preventing the ghosts that linger there from moving on. Fleeing a breakup, Marion Lafournier, a mid-20s Ojibwe, seeks solace in the slot machine's siren song. Here he falls afoul of the Sandman, an encounter he barely escapes through the timely intervention of his cousins Alana and Sherry, who both work at the casino and are intimately aware of the Sandman's power. Meanwhile, Glenn Nealon, recently out of the closet and an inspiring documentarian, hopes to capture the faces of the Ojibwe land while experiencing the casino's thrills. But he will learn that all who choose to play the Sandman's games are in danger of falling into his grasp. So I'm interested about this one, or I'm interested in reading this one. It's got kind of those horror elements that I'm typically drawn to, and I've been really into horror that kind of incorporates Indigenous mythologies into it. I really loved Bad Cree, which I read last year, and a Cree comic book called Bad Medicine that was quite creepy and interesting. But most of these kind of Indigenous horror mythologies that I've read have been focused more on Cree mythology. So I'm really excited to read a horror that's more about Ojibwe mythology, kind of reaching into these other nations and seeing where that horror can be taken. And especially after spending so many years of my life in Minnesota, I'm really looking forward to this one. So yeah, I think this is a second book by this author. He has a debut that's been out for a few years. But if you're like me, if you enjoyed Bad Cree or Bad Medicine, the comic book, then you might be interested in Passing Through a Prairie Country by Dennis E. Staples, and that one's out March 18th. And I do have an arc of that book, so I hopefully will be able to read it before March 18th, and I can report back to see how it is. But yeah, that is my first book for today, and I think next we will hear from Corrine.
All right, I'm back on my nonsense. I'm fully digging into my nonsense. I'm comfortable in my nonsense like a little pig in mud. So I'm going back to my roots for my first pick here. We're going to true crime. We're cramming that true crime, and it's also a book about books, and it's also a book about esoteric religions in America in the 19th century. Another like strange pet love of mine. So this book really has it all for me. So the author of this book is a fairly well-known true crime writer and journalist. Probably her most famous book would be American Sherlock or Deadly Air, but she is also a very well-known true crime podcaster. Notably, Wicked Words, where she interviews different authors and people working in the justice system about what case they cannot get rid of. And also one of my favorite podcasts, Buried Bones with Paul Holes, where they look at historical through a current perspective. And this is, of course, Kate Winkler Dawson. And she has a new book looking at the inspiration behind one of America's seminal works of literature that I kind of didn't know was based on a true crime case, but it turns out all those like Edgar Allan Poe, Nathaniel Hawthorne, they were all obsessed with true crime in the same way that we are now. So this is the book, The Sinners All Bow. Two authors, one murder, and the real Hester Prynne. So looking at the origins of the Scarlet Letter. So in the early 19th century, 1832, a young woman was found dead in a small farmyard in New England. Now, as they started to investigate her passing, they found always salacious letter between her and a Methodist minister who was very charismatic and very distrusted by the establishment. As they looked into her death, they tried to determine whether she had taken her own life or whether something more sinister was at work. Now, one of the people that got obsessed with this case was the author, Nathaniel Hawthorne, who from this case started writing The Scarlet Letter, but also the Victorian author Catherine Reed Arnold Williams, who was so interested in this case that she wrote one of the very first true crime books. So this is, in the way that Kate Winkler Dawson always does, a way of investigating a crime that reflects greater society. So this book is looking at not only of the phenomenon of true crime and how it inspired literature, but also about the author's attitudes towards Methodists in the 19th century and the deep distrust of religion there, as well as looking at Sarah herself. So centering the victim in this story and trying to figure out how she fit into a society that was trying to constrict her. I love Kate Winkler Dawson. I think she's such an interesting writer. Takes a strong look at society. It's always a very feminist bent of kind of looking how women navigated these very constricting social milieus. And she brings her history into it. And I am so looking forward to it. Obviously, this case has been like never solved, but she's bringing all those modern forensic things into it to try and solve it. Even if she doesn't, you know what? It's fine. I'll just enjoy the ride. And, you know, maybe this will finally convince me to read The Scarlet Letter. Maybe. We'll see. All right, Virginia, what is your number 5 pick? And yeah, I'm throwing numbers at it because I love a good number.
Yeah, just like Sadie, this is totally not numbered, even though someone else got numbers. But like, you know, for Emma and I, it will be, I don't know, like Bingo Stray Dog that will persuade us to read The Scarlet Letter. Maybe. I don't know. Yeah, we'll see.
I went to in high school because I'm American, and I actually did. I didn't mind The Scarlet Letter.
Oh, there you go. There you
So
go.
if you're interested in old American literature, you could check it out.
All right. Well, for my first pick, it is probably a little bit unlike most of the things I've been reading recently. But it does go back to kind of, I guess, in some ways, when I first started reading books in translation, this was sort of the genre that I gravitate towards. And it is something that I haven't read for a while, a kind of a thriller slash mystery slash horror kind of combo. Very, very big in Japan. And that's kind of how I started reading a Japanese book in translation without by Natsuo Kirino, you know, all the Keigo Higashino books, you know, The Devotion of a Suspect X, still one of my favorite. And then also watching all the Japanese drama that is all like kind of mystery kind of drama like Keizoku, which is again still one of my favorite. So yeah, a little bit unlike it, but kind of going full circle. The other thing that is kind of a little bit different is that it is also a super, super immensely popular book in Japan. In fact, this particular author has 3 out of the top 10 best-selling books last year in Japan. And so I was kind of like, and normally I don't go with the popular reads, but I was very, very curious about like, what is it that captured the imagination of so many people? And thanks to translator Jim Rion, we get to participate in this cultural phenomenon of Uketsu. That is the author's name, a pseudonym that in Japanese apparently mean rain hole or rain pits or something like that. He is like also has a YouTube channel that has like millions of subscribers, and he tends to appear on, oh, I should say they appear on the on his channel, usually wearing a paper mache kind of white mask with like tiny little black holes for eyes and nose. He's usually wearing all black, and of course his voice is all distorted, so nobody really know who this particular author is, which of course adds to the mystique of it. So the book that is coming out, in fact, I think on the release date is the same as this particular episode that you're going to get to hear. It is called Strange Pictures, and it is the second book by the author. And the translator actually recommended to the publisher to publish this one first instead of Strange Houses, which is the one that is going to come out in June, because he feels that this one is a little bit more structured, and he thought that there would be a better introduction to the author to readers around the world. So that's kind of how we decided to do this. But Strange Houses will be available in June, and there's also a manga series that is based on that. I think it's already out in English, published by 7C, so you can also go check that out. I think it's called Strange House or something like that. Anyway, so Ugetsu is this like super popular author, and as I say, YouTuber in Japan. And the book Strange Pictures make use of, like a lot of kind of like standard kind of mysteries in Japan, especially make use of a lot of like drawings and illustrations and like lists and things like that to kind of like supplement the story, to kind of give you more clues about sort of what's sort of going on. And the story begins with like a pretty ordinary, like it's just 2 people that they're like, oh, like I discovered this blog that is like, quite interesting, like, well, you should go read it. And so our narrator decided to take a look. And the blog is not really something that he would normally be interested in, because when he was reading, he was like, okay, well, it sounds like it's like from a guy who's like about to become a father. So he decides to start a blog to talk about like, as he was expecting, and he and his wife was expecting, like what are some of the joys, the anxieties, the, like the fears that he has, and he's just want to write it all out. So not a subject that our narrator would really particularly care about or can relate to. But as when you're reading a blog, the first entry, the first post is the most recent thing. And it was about 1.5 years ago. And this is what it said: to the one I love most, I'm going to stop updating this blog today. I finally figured out the secret of those 3 drawings. I can't imagine the kind of pain you must have been suffering, nor can I understand the depths of whatever sin you committed. I cannot forgive you, but even so, I will always love you. And so that's what piqued the interest of our narrator. So he went back all the way to the beginning to try to find out what happened. And he saw those drawings that was referred to in this latest post. And he learned about, like this particular, the author of the blog, like his like impending fatherhood. And he learned that, like, his child was born, he's got a son, but his wife died in childbirth. So there's something that has happened, and there was a whole long gap that he hasn't updated his blog. And suddenly this post came up about 1.5 years ago saying that he's going to stop updating. And so we sort of learn, and along with this narrator, to try to figure out what has actually happened. And about 1/4 of the book, that particular story ends. And so you get some sort of resolution. And then the next chapter begins with some entirely new characters and a new story. And you're like, okay, so this is kind of like maybe a series of short story, but oh no, everything is connected as you start reading more and more. And you slowly realize that there's how much more story there is to it. And there's decades of family secrets in this that started off, that all of this, that everything is kind of like tied together. And so, like and of course, you slowly realize like all the like very unsettling things that has happened. And I think the fun part, I would assume for a lot of readers, is that you feel like you're getting involved because of all the drawings, all the illustrations. You feel like you're getting involved in investigating along the way and trying to learn more about what happens. And I know that in the next book, Strange House, a lot of floor plans, and I love a book with a lot of floor plans. There's something about like, in like a thriller when you have like these like, they show you where all the rooms and where everything happens. I'm very excited about that. I don't know why. But yeah, so I'm for anybody who's looking for kind of like a page-turning thriller, horror, mystery kind of combo, give you like a good book onion that you can just like peel layers and layers and layers after, and you can discover more and more things and how everything ties together. I think this will be a good choice, and it's coming out very soon, so you don't have to wait very long. So that is Strange Pictures by Uketsu, translated by Jim Rion, coming out, I believe, next Tuesday. And the next book, Strange Houses, will be coming out in June. So all right. So thank you. Excited to hear, like a lot of good books that are coming out. And I thought since, like this is kind of our first episode altogether, and it has only been like what 10 to what days today? 10 days? 10 days since in 2025. I thought I would kind of like maybe check in and kind of find out like what are some of the first things that you did this year. So my first question for everybody is, what is the first, of course, because it's a book podcast, what is the first book that you pick up and read in 2025?
I could go first because I remember mine. This kind of spoils a little bit what we might be talking about next week on the podcast. But my first book was me revisiting a book that I loved in childhood. So the first book that I read in 2025, I think I probably read it all in one day because it's a children's book, but it was the first book from the series of Unfortunate Events series, called The Bad Beginning. And it was like, it made me just as happy as it did when I was a kid. It's just like, it's so fun. It's this quirky little mystery with creepy adult villains and stuff. So I thoroughly enjoyed it. And then I proceeded to read the next 5 books of the series.
I should show you my picture of my wedding cake because on the top is a stack of books, of course. And then there's all the spine of all the different books that my husband and I like. And then on top is The Bad Beginning, because obviously. And we actually brought it to see Lemony Snicket when he came to Vancouver. And I think he was a little bit like taken back. He was like, what the heck? Because he signed the photo and he was just like, but why? Why would you do that? Anyway, yeah. So my first book, I think, was Uncanny: The Origins of Fear, really a nonfiction and a memoir, which I don't usually read, but it is by Junji Ito, the famous, popular horror manga artist. And it's a book about like kind of like his kind of talking about like how he started in writing horror, and his life, starting off as a dental, not a dentist, but like the people that make like, I guess, dental stuff, like I don't know, like yeah, like all the weird yeah. And it's like, and then he talks about that, and then like how he like started like drawing manga, and then it turns into like kind of full-time thing, and he talks about like how he gets his ideas. There's so many sketches, so many like little notes, which is really cool to see like what his process is, his writing process is, his drawing process. And like I have to say, like I think he's like that on videos too, but like he's such a normal guy, so super regular, so humble. Like just he keep talking about like, oh, I'm really bad at this. I can't really draw this stuff, like like he was just so like seems like such a nice guy. And so I'm like, how did you come up with like twisting people into spirals, or like sharks with legs? Like how are you coming up with all these ideas? But yet you just seem so regular. It was awesome. And it was really kind of nice. I think it's always nice to see those behind the scenes, of like how a writer, right, how a manga artist drew. So like it was very exciting. So yeah, so that was Uncanny: The Origins of Fear.
Nice. My first I first did like a quick reread of Tilly Waldron's On a Sunbeam because I love it. But my first like read was I'm trying to give the cozy fantasy genre another chance after Emma and I our disastrous first foray into the genre of The Book That Shall Not Be Named. I was like, okay, you can't just base your entire opinion of a genre on one book. So I tried another. I tried The Teller of Small Fortunes by Julie Long, and it was fine. It was all right. It was fine. I wasn't upset. Wasn't,
I want to hear Virginia's opinions.
Have you read this, Virginia? Yeah, no.
High praise from you again. It was all right. I don't hate it.
It was fine. It was fine. It took me a long time to finish it because I was like, okay. It's fine. It was fine. It was fine. What I really actually did enjoy about that book is that there was no romance with the main character, which I was like, oh, you rarely see that in any genre, and there just wasn't. And so I was kind of like very pleasantly surprised by that. So that's why I was like, okay, all right, okay.
Yeah, I agree. It was fine. It was fine. I read it last year and I'm like, it was, yeah, nothing like too exciting to talk about. And I feel like, so this is what I actually often struggle with cozy fantasy genre because of this, where they're okay. They move along. There's a story usually. They do their thing, but there's not anything that you're kind of left with to be excited by or wanting to read more of, or yeah. So I would agree with that assessment of that book. It was fine.
Inoffensive, right? I think like it's like some music. It's just like it's inoffensive. It's just there in the background. It's fine. It doesn't bother you. You won't need to turn it off. You can just let it be.
It's very true, but like as a reading experience, I always want it to elicit more of an emotion, right? Like that's kind of what I read, either excitement or disgust or infuriating. Like I want it to elicit something in me. And I think it is just not this particular author. I think it's just the genre. Because I have like the spell work Sarah Beth Durst's new one as well. So I'm like, I gotta give this a try. But
I feel like Sarah Beth Durst is better. I feel like, yeah, she's proven herself. I feel like she have more things. Yeah, so I trust in her a little bit more. I feel like maybe
she's just got that backlog and that experience of stuff, and like she's written so much that I'm willing to give it more of a shot. I don't know, Sadie, if you've read this one, but like the same thing. I felt like this one, I was just, mhm, and I wanted to like it so much, but I was just, it didn't. Yeah, it was fine.
Yeah, I think I read it for, I think it was the cat episode actually. And I read like a bunch of books for that episode, and none of them really talked to me in any particular way. And so yeah, no, it was among them. Yeah, no, there's a book that I started last year called Rewitched by Lucy Jane Wood. And I didn't finish it, and I don't know if I will. It's just been sitting on Goodreads. I eventually have to return it to Libby because there are a lot of holds on it. A lot. But I don't know if I will ever finish it. It's the same things, like it's fine. I feel like that this is maybe strange to say, work better as like movie or like in that medium. Like I feel like they might work better in that medium as opposed to a written medium.
Or fanfic.
Could be too. Yeah. Yeah.
I'm like, I can't figure out. I keep slapping my table and turning my mic off. More slaps. I just feel passionately impassioned about like cozy fantasy. Never mind. I can keep that comment to myself.
But yeah, so the book that I actually started reading this year, I had two that I had not finished at the end of 2024. And so I'm not going to count those ones because I finished on like January 1st for both of them. And I don't feel like it really counts as the first book I picked up. But the first one I did was an author I love, a series I love, the Lady Sherlock series by Sherry Thomas, which is like a female take on Sherlock Holmes. So this is the latest book in that series, The Ruse of Shadows. It is surprisingly taking me a long time to read it. I've finished other books that I picked up after this one, but I think that's just the way that my reading has been going right now. But I am enjoying it. It's one of those ones where I can just kind of go back and revisit the world, revisit the series, and just kind of get lost in it for a little bit. So yeah, that was the first one, Ruse of Shadows by Sherry Thomas.
Excellent. Great. So I think we all started off the year with something that we enjoy. So that what kind of enjoy, in some cases, okay, enjoy. So that's good.
Right.
Okay, so on to our round two of books that we are looking forward to reading. Let's see what Miss Corinne has for us.
Another like within my wheelhouse book. So fresh off the 2024 Nobel Prize for Literature winner, the first winner from South Korea, an incredible writer whose famous works include Human Acts, The Vegetarian, The White Book, Greek Lessons, all the things, who has been kind of like hailed by the Nobel Committee for her like insightful look into human nature, the kind of impact of trauma over generations and violence. If you've ever heard her kind of like her speeches, you know that it's just like an incredible mind at work. Her writing, thinking kind of like the Greek lessons, is very symbolic, very poetic, very kind of thick and dense. Sometimes as you're reading it, you're not quite sure what's going on, but you're enjoying it. So this is her new book coming out January 21st. And it is We Do Not Part by Han Kang. And it's translated by yaewon and Paige Aniyah Morris. So this book is probably closer to one of her earlier works, Human Acts, in that it is kind of looking at the impact of violence, government violence, violence of the people against other people, on kind of like a sensitive soul who's kind of unpacking that trauma and what that means. So sometimes with her books, I kind of read the synopsis and sure, I think that's what's happening. As far as I can tell, that's what's happening. But trying to describe them is kind of pointless, because you're just there for like atmosphere and images. So loosely, according to the publisher, the plot is about Kyung-ha, who is, according to the publisher, kind of like a stand-in for the author. And she gets a call from her friend Inson, who is in a hospital in Seoul. And she asks her friend to go to Jeju Island to take care of her bird, Ama, while she is in the hospital. And so she is traveling to this island. As she arrives, it's the middle of a snowstorm, a horrible snowstorm. And so she's not sure whether she's going to be able to arrive in time to save the bird or whether she is going to arrive in time to kind of save herself. That's bones of it. But again, the same as Human Acts, it's kind of looking at a historical act of violence and the impact thereof. So this book is really talking about the April 1948 Jeju massacre and the massacres and violence that occurred before then, against the people. So soldiers attacking civilians, soldiers attacking protesters. And so she's really writing about how how that violence impacts people and how regular people that we go to the store with, that we ride the bus with, that we cross on the street are capable of doing horrible acts against each other. I think in one of the speeches that she gave, she really talks like as a child, the fact that people could do such horrible things to each other, like she couldn't comprehend it, she couldn't understand it, and still as an adult she can't understand how we can do such things to each other. So I suspect again it will be a heartbreaking work of beauty and poetry, that again you might not always understand what's happening when you're reading it, but you'll feel yourself moved in deeply impactful ways by the end of it. And I think that's kind of like the power of her books, is that you don't, in the midst of it, you feel so unsettled by what's happening, and you don't always feel grounded. It's like kind of like you're floating above, looking at things, looking down, and then when you come to the end of it, you feel like you crash back down to earth and you're really changed by that experience. So I'm really looking forward to this. Again, she's the Nobel Prize winner of Literature 2024. Very well deserved. Was very, very excited to see her win. And yeah, I'm really happy that her books are reaching such a wide audience with this. So yep. We do not part. January 21st. January is a great month for books. Great month. Sinners All Bow, January 7th. Most of my books are in January, so I'm really looking forward to all of my pre-orders coming through. All right, we're going to swing this over to Virginia in an act of revenge.
It's perfect because I'm going to reorder my list, because from a Nobel Prize winner to a Nobel Prize not winner, to a not winner, because this is a book that I've never read this author. It's a prolific author, never read him before, not even heard of him. Sorry, Australia. Until last year, just before the Nobel Prize for Literature was announced, and there was, of course, all the speculation about who is going to win this year, the odds and the bets, because there's bets for everything. And this person's name came up year after year, and they thought this might be his year. An author that the Guardian called one of the Australia's greatest writers. The New York Times called him one of the best English language writers alive. But no, he did not win. So maybe there's always another year. But because of that, I was like, okay, yeah. So this name kind of like got on my radar. And then I saw that, of course, the most anticipated list from me cannot be complete unless there's a book published by And Other Stories. And I saw that there was a book coming out from this publisher by this author. So I felt like this would be the one that I was going to have to read. And that is called and another one of Corinne's kind of favorite type of cover, the big white blob. Barley Patch by Gerald Murnane. So again, an Australian author, and I am very excited to kind of see what this is. So this Barley Patch is actually was published in Australia in 2009, and it was the first book after 14 years, after he has sort of sworn off writing fiction. So it was really appropriate that this book, one of the central questions and the question that started the novel is, must I write? And it started off with a like sort of recounting an anecdote of a struggling poet kind of approaching Austrian poet Rainer Maria Rilke and say, like hoping that maybe this like established poet can give him some advice, maybe, like hook him up with some publishers. But in reply, not only did Rilke did not say anything about his work, but also asked him, and this above all, you need to ask yourself in the stillest hour of your night, must I write? And so that's how this novel begins. It is a novel. It is supposed to be a novel, even though when you read it, you're like, is this really a novel? Is it like Murnane's actual like his own kind of experience? It's kind of hard to tell, but it is sort of explored that act of writing and the act of imagining. Even again, though Murnane, or the narrator, I should say, keep claiming that he has no imagination whatsoever. And according to the publisher, it said it finally gives us that glimpse of the mythical place where the characters of fiction dwell before they come into existence in books. So it starts with the narrator talking about the books that he read when he was young, and how he wants to become sort of part of it, how he interacts with the characters, even the side characters, and sometimes they even, for him, make more of an impression, and how he might read a line and then he might like take it and imagine sort of the life after kind of thing. And so, like talking about just like how sort of the whole idea of writing, and what fiction writing is. And the sense that I get from like the little preview that I read so far was that it really like, I feel like his books are, he's fascinated with like images, and he would get very like kind of or on a particular image, he would get very hung up on it, and he would just talk a little bit about it. And then just the way he writes, there's this kind of understated like playfulness to it in some ways, even though he seems very genuine, very like kind of like in some ways kind of unconventional, because he would like start talking about something and he would oh well, in the previous paragraph when I was talking about my uncle, it reminded me I was going to say something. So it's just the way that he has like this tension but not tension that he keep like sort of building upon, and it's the type of writing that like I really enjoy, because it makes it like more interesting to me, when people are willing to do something different about how they tell stories. And that to me is always something that I enjoy when I'm reading so authors from around the world, because everybody has a different way of telling stories. And I like it when it is a little bit different, in my mind. But I think it will be a really, really, again, another really interesting look at sort of what fiction is and why we write. And in some ways, I guess also why we read. And so, of course, what seals the deal for me is the line in the publisher's blurb that said it has something in the spirit of Italo Calvino and George Perec. So I feel like it is like a kind of an overused comparison, when you just keep coming ramming so Calvino, but it gets me every time, so it also works. So an unclassifiable work according to many. He has some weird fascination of like apparently horse racing and also like two-story houses and among many other things. So I can't wait to encounter those little different, like all the things that he likes, and kind of learn a little bit more about the act of writing. So with my Calvino mention, for the first time on the year, I'm going to pass this over to Sadie.
Do you think it's because he only lived in one-story houses or only lived in three-story houses that he just doesn't understand the two-story houses? I don't know.
I don't know.
You'll have to let me know. You'll have to read it and let me know.
I will.
All right. Well, for my not going to give this a number, second book I am talking about pick. This is actually one that just came onto my radar yesterday, through an email from NetGalley. There's like, here's some books we think that you might be interested in. I'm like, you know what, NetGalley, you might be right. You might be right. So this one is an author that I'm not familiar with at all. I've looked into her a little bit, and she started her career as a financial journalist. Not sure how she got from there to where she is now, but kind of the most prevalent information about her is as a financial journalist, and that is Maha Khan Phillips. And the book that she has coming out at the beginning of April is called The Museum Detective. And it is based or inspired by real life antiquities scandal in Pakistan. I think I did Kareen's ears perk up there. Like, yeah. And the story follows a archaeologist, Dr. Gul Dilani, and Dr. Gul Dilani gets a call in the middle of the night from the Sindhi police. She thinks that they have maybe finally found her niece, Manaz. Now, Manaz has been missing for 3 years, and Gould has no idea where she is, where she could have gone. She's racked with grief ever since Manaz disappeared. She's able to distract herself a little bit. She's a curator at the Museum of Heritage and History in Karachi. She's one of the country's leading experts in archaeology and ancient civilizations, which for a woman is a very, very hard-won position. So she's able to kind of distract herself from Manaz's disappearance with her work. Unfortunately, the call in the middle of the night is not to do with Manaz. Ghoul is instead asked to come to a narcotics investigation. She's not entirely sure why, but she's invited to a narcotics investigation in a remote desert region in Western Pakistan. Now, what she does not expect in this kind of drug bust is that what they find is a life-size, seemingly authentic mummy. Now, the sarcophagus is decorated with symbols from Persepolis, and everyone is kind of confused as to why this mummy is here, where this mummy came from, why in this kind of narcotics investigation this mummy has suddenly appeared. And Ghoul feels that she can't, in her right mind, in her professional duty, leave this sarcophagus to careless or corrupt hands. And so she and her, as it describes them, her team of unlikely misfits. Not exactly sure what that means in this case. Ghoul decides to get to the bottom of why this mummy is here, where this mummy has come from, what route the mummy was supposed to be taking, and kind of figure out what's up with this mummy. But her quest for the truth puts her in the throes of a dangerous conspiracy, threatens to collide with her ongoing search for Manaz. So everything might come full circle for her. The Goodreads description says that this is a portrait of a city fueled by corruption and a woman relentlessly in the pursuit of justice. It is described as akin to Sue Grafton and Elsa Hart, neither of which I have ever read. I know my mother loved Sue Grafton. I would buy her the latest alphabet for Christmas when I was a child, but I have never read Sue Grafton myself, so I'm not sure exactly what that means when it's compared to her work. But the only genre it is listed as is mystery. There's nothing else that's kind of attached to it. But I think it's going to be kind of a fast-paced, exciting crime thriller. It introduces Ghoul as kind of an amateur sleuth, so I'm hoping, well, we'll see how I like it, but I'm hoping that there might be more books to come in this series. It's definitely adjacent, I think, to things that I have liked in the past. Maybe not exactly in my wheelhouse, but I think that kind of the treasure hunting and antiquities kind of crime mystery aspects of it are definitely something that I am drawn to. So this is The Museum Detective by Maha Khan Phillips.
All right, my second most anticipated book is one that's a little bit outside of my typical reading tastes. So I found this one while kind of browsing around NetGalley looking for different arcs that I could check out for the upcoming release months. I found this book right around the time that I had read Witches by Brenda Lozano, which if you listen to the Latin American Heritage Month episode, that one was kind of about this culture in Mexico, this indigenous culture in Mexico down in the Oaxaca area. And it kind of sparked this interest in me in learning more about like indigenous Mexican cultures and mythologies and folklores and all that stuff that kind of interests me in other areas, but I haven't really read much about Mexico. So this book is another kind of mythology story. It is a retelling of someone who's described as one of the most controversial and misunderstood women in Mexico's history and mythology. So this book is called Malinalli by Veronica Chapa, and the cover looks like this. And this one will be out in March, I think. Release date is March 11th. So I'll share a bit of the description of the story. It's about a real-life historical figure from the 16th century, the woman known by many names, but most commonly as Malinalli or La Malinche, who was the Nahua interpreter who helped the Spanish conquistador Hernan Cortez communicate with the native people of Mexico. So she's an indigenous woman who was able to communicate with the Spanish, the conquistadors, the folks coming in to colonize Mexico. When Indigenous leaders saw her marching into their cities, they believed that she was a goddess, someone that was there to save them, blessed with the divine power to interpret the Spaniards' intentions for their land. Later, historians and pop culture would deem her as a traitor, as the native girl who helped sell Mexico's future to an invader. So this book is a fantasy retelling of the story of Malinalli. Malinalli is all of those things. She is kind of this powerhouse of a woman. She's someone who is really, really significant in Mexico's history, but she's also a very young girl. She was kidnapped into slavery by the age of 12. She was fighting to survive the devastation brought on both by the Spanish and by the greed and the cruelty of the emperor of the Aztec Empire, whose name I will probably mispronounce, but it's Moctezuma. And in this version of the story, in this version of Malinalli, she's blessed with magical powers and supported by a close-knit circle of priestesses. And she vows to help defend her people's legacy. So it's kind of a more like feminist, kind of female leading magical version of the original Malinalli story. This one is the first novel to reimagine and reinterpret Malinalli's story with empathy, with humanity, and with the awe that she has always deserved. This is also a debut novel, so I'm interested to kind of check out Veronica Chapa's writing style, see if it's something that I'll see if she's the kind of writer that I'll come back and revisit in the future. And reviewers say it spins an epic tale of magic, sisterhood, survival, and Mexican resilience. So I love a good mythological retelling, but I haven't really read anything about Mexican mythologies, was kind of my first delve into learning more about Indigenous Mexican cultures, kind of since I was in Spanish class in high school. So I'm always looking for a strong female lead, kind of a Joan of Arc type of character, or a witch. I love a woman with magical powers. So this one is Malinalli, and it is going to be out on March 11th.
So so we learn about each other's first book that we picked up. So now I'd like to know, just for Corinne's sake, what is the first song that you listen to?
This is going to be easy for me. This is a New Year's tradition. I always listen to BTS's 0 O'Clock. So it is a song that if you time it exactly right, if you start it at exactly the right time, at a certain point at exactly midnight, which is 0 o'clock, so 0000, there's a line in the song. It's like, it's 0 o'clock, you can start everything over again, which I think is a beautiful sentiment for the new year. It's a wonderful song about how, however stuck you are, whatever you're kind of going through, at 0 o'clock, time resets and you can start again. So yep, that's the first song that I listened to. And then I went straight into Magic Shop and then, like the rest of my playlist.
I'm impressed that you stayed up. Should be able
I
to do
never
that.
sleep.
It was like one of our coworkers was talking about how I think they said that they watched the whole Lord of the Rings business. And again, it's the same thing, like you have to time it or whatever, that they'll say a certain line. They didn't quite make it, but close to that.
I kept seeing a bunch of those on coming up on social media. Like, if you watch this movie and you time it, you have to start it at exactly this time. And there was a lot of those coming up this year. I didn't do any of them.
Sleep is good. Sleep is good. What about you, Sadie? You were telling us that it could have been a song. Maybe.
So it was most likely Peppa. I can't say what for sure. Trying to think of New Year's, what I did on New Year's Day. It could have also been Mickey Mouse. Evie likes to jump up and down on the bed to a specific Mickey Mouse song that has a talking part and then a singing part. And so listen during the talking part, and then she jumps during the singing part, and she calls it "This Is How I Get My Bounces Out," which is a Tigger thing. It's a Winnie the Pooh thing. She says she has a lot of bounces in her and she has to get her bounces out, and that's how. So it could have been Mickey Mouse. It could have very, very well been Peppa Pig. I looked on my Spotify. It does not say timestamps, but the only adult song that I searched for was "Building a Mystery" by Sarah McLachlan. So it also could have been that. Which I remember me and Tyler were having a discussion about what the actual line in in the song. I don't remember what he thought it was, but I knew it was building a mystery. And then I played it for him to prove that. I don't know if it was on New Year's Day, but that was the only adult song that showed up on my Spotify. So I'm going to say, bringing it back to Sarah McLachlan, Building a Mystery.
Excellent choice. I don't listen to a lot, I think, but I would assume that it will probably be this Japanese artist called Kenshi Yonetsu. I'm slightly obsessed with him at the moment. And most people would probably know him from all the anime like theme songs that he does. Chainsaw Man, like My Hero Academia, and also the Boy and the Heron, the Miyazaki's recent movie. So he also does the theme songs. And that's kind of how I got onto listening to him. So I would assume that it's probably because my playlist starts with Stray Sheep, which is my favorite, and it's probably that. I tend to do it on shuffle, but like some days I'm just like, no, I want to listen to that first. So I feel like that probably is that one. So yeah.